Okay, so good evening and welcome to the Community Tree Nursery Collaborative webinar, Making Money Grow from Trees. I'm Hilary and I'm the coordinator for the CTNC. We have two speakers this evening, Owen and Alex Hewitt, and I'll introduce them shortly. Just give a little introduction to the CTNC for those who haven't been before. So it's a peer-to-peer learning network supporting community tree nurseries throughout the UK to share good practice and discuss common challenges and also build community between those involved. I've pasted a few useful links for you in the start of the chat section. One is to register on the mailing list, and I'd also like to draw your attention especially to our new Crowdfunder page for the CTNC. As some of you will probably know, our funding is soon to expire and we're busy applying for longer term funding. And in the meantime, we're hoping to raise enough money to finance the continuation of the project in the short term, whilst we're waiting for news on our applications. So I'd be really grateful if you could share the Crowdfunder link and support this if you can at all. Thank you. So to introduce our first speaker, Owen, who is the director of Moor Trees in Devon, and I'm sure some of you will know and recognise Adam from previous online sessions with us. His career includes time in conservation management, forest ranger work, and also self-employment as a tree surgeon. And Adam is a member of the core group, the CTNC as well. So welcome, Adam.
Thank you. Right, my apologies initially because I have got a bad cough cold which just started over the weekend. So if I suddenly mute myself or video goes off for a second, it's because I'm having a coughing fit. But I will return. If I don't, dial 999. So I'm going to share a screen with you and do a presentation on fundraising for your community tree nursery. Just bear with me one moment. Now you should be seeing a screen there which says More Trees Creating Native Woodland, Fundraising for your community tree nursery. I can see a nod of heads, so that's fantastic, thank you. And we shall continue. So I'm the current director of Moor Trees, been with Moor Trees for 5 years. We're a community tree nursery that's been going over 20 years, and we have two community tree nurseries. We are aiming to grow about 60,000 trees a year. Well, sorry, 60,000 trees growing at any one time. So that's not producing 60,000 trees for each year going out. That's producing somewhere around about 20,000 trees a year going out is the aspiration. Because some of those trees will take anything 18 months to 3 years to get to the right size, depending on the species. Now, as we know, fundraising is always the challenge, and this seminar, this webinar is all about how we go about that. So some just hints and tips. I'm not to say that we're the experts, and I would love to hear, whether it be through other social media or direct email to ourselves, of anybody who has any other successes, because like other organizations, we also do sometimes struggle to get funding as well. So this, just as an introduction, is one of the key things to fundraising we find is definitely having a good cohort of volunteers, demonstrating that you can really engage with the community. And fundraising takes a lot of time and energy. So really, it's great if you can have 1 or 2 people who can really focus on it. It takes time. You have to plan ahead. You need to sort of think of projects. If you're going for capital work, sort of 6 months ahead. And if you're going for a revenue funding, that's funding for your everyday payments, then that sometimes can be even more challenging. The more money you want, the more time you're going to have to give to it. So the first question is to ask, what is it that you're fundraising for? And the good news is that in any community tree nursery, almost anything can be fundraised for. It could be signage, hand tools, PPE, wages, water bills, plant pots. there's almost anything you could actually apply for funding for. So don't think anything is too small or too little, but it's better to try and group it and coordinate it into a cohesive project. So it's helpful if you keep a list of everything that you're wanting, as well as a rough description of what will be involved and what you want it for. So we'll just look at a few of the different methods for fundraising. It's great if you can involve your local community. And if your community knows about your projects, they'll get involved, but they will also donate. If your project feels valued, your community nursery feels valued locally, then you're likely to get many more ambassadors for that. And therefore, where it comes to doing some fundraising, you can get them to help put the word out. Other people, fundraising as well, people quite often get caught up in thinking, right, we need to get £20,000 or £10,000 and think of it as £10,000 as a big pot of money. Don't break that down, because trust me, you can have a lot of cake stalls and coffee mornings and small market stalls and things like that, and each of them may only bring in £150 to £200. But over a year, if those events are running frequently, then actually that can add up to quite a lot of money. It can really significantly help you as an organization. And also, don't think that you have to just do it yourself, because quite often people think of fundraising, it can be quite a lonely existence if you're just smashing in the applications one after another. But if you are running events and you can get your volunteers involved, then that spreads the load, and so someone may take on the responsibility of running a quiz night at the local pub. Someone might run a raffle at the local village fete, the summer fete, for example. And all of these things can sort of spread the load, but still bring in some income. And also, when you are doing those kind of events, what you're doing is raising your profile all the time, and that just helps too. So someone might, if they see you do some social media advertising for an event, whether it be for volunteers or whether it be for asking for donations, if they've heard of you or seen you at a village fete, country fair, in the local press, at the local pub, they'll remember that. So, it's a good hook. So definitely don't disengage from those small events that go with your local community. If you've got people who are teachers or run local youth groups, things like that, again, it's fantastic. Get them involved. If you can get young people involved, if your parents just, when your kids want something, whether it's, the latest video game, comic book, or chocolate bar, the amount of pressure they can put on you as a parent is almost intolerable. So if you can get them to put that same pressure onto other people for your charity, then fantastic. So I think if you can get young people involved, they're great ambassadors, and that's definitely worth working. Whether it's they could do non-uniform day, bake sales, and things like that. So there's plenty of opportunities there for doing some smaller fundraising initiatives. Corporate groups are very interested these days in working with local organizations. So local companies working with local organizations. At Moor Trees, we've spent quite a bit of time reaching out and engaging with local companies. And we're very fortunate to have 5 or 6 local companies that have supported us year after year. Now, those sums of money vary depending on the size of the local company. Some local companies may donate £50 a month. Some local companies may become a corporate sponsor that will give £10,000 for the year. So it all depends on the story that you're selling and the involvement that you're willing to offer. But don't be embarrassed to ask, and there is quite a lot of cold calling involved in this, but you will definitely get some rewards. And with those corporate days, it's not just to ask them for money and then take the money, it's bringing them into the story, it's getting them involved, bringing them out on days, getting them involved, for example, in tree planting or seed growing, giving them exposure on your social media accounts, or if you run a newsletter, anything like that, getting a copy in the press, just saying how grateful you are for their support, and all of these things, you know, local companies really appreciate both the exposure it gives to them, but again, quite often they want to give something back. They want to give something back into the community, and quite a lot of the corporate groups we've worked with over the years, the commonality is they all very much want to, because they have they have a company around Dartmoor, they're employing people around Dartmoor, they want to give something back onto Dartmoor, and they want to do something that's environmentally sound, and they see tree planting and tree growing as part of that. So it's fantastic, and they can be really, really helpful as well in promoting you as an organization. It's reciprocal. Pardon me. So whilst we promote them and we get them involved in corporate days, they actually then put us onto their social media, they put us onto their website. And you know, some of these companies have a much wider reach than we do as a small organization, and therefore the exposure is absolutely fantastic. So do think about getting in touch with companies, but I accept there is quite a bit of cold calling, but there are many opportunities to engage with them, get them into social media, get photographs. Photographs are fantastic. Get your logos out there if you have logos, and so on and so forth. There are sometimes very simple things as well with corporates as well, that there is payroll giving scheme. So this is something where local, well, not local companies, just any company who runs a payroll, the members can opt to donate some of their payroll to a local charity on the payroll giving scheme. So that if you make companies aware of that and they can promote that to their employees, you may get some income from that. And again, all of these things aren't always huge amounts at all, but they do all add up. And promoting, as we just said, almost like with the schools or with young people, just workplace fundraising events as well. We've had some great support from individuals and corporates over time. In the pitch here with the Build Back Better, this was Novus. They came to us. They're a social enterprise with the Guinness Partnership and Novus, and they donated £5,000 to us as a charity, and did some work with us in terms of growing trees and having a corporate day where they would spend their time with us, bring their employees to us, and learn about the work that we did, and then take that back to their workplace. They did a video about their experience, put it on their social media. It was fantastic exposure, and as I said, you know, it was great that they approached us. Crowdfunding can be very successful, but it can be quite challenging. One of the things that we've discovered about crowdfunding projects is you have to be on it constantly, and you need to be really quite modern with it. You know, you need to be quite media savvy, quite use social media, particularly use videos and images as engagement, and have a story and keep delivering on that story. So have a project, a defined project, have a start and an end date, have an expectation and an ask in terms of funding, and then push it out there. There are some organizations like Aviva who are great, and they you can apply to Aviva and then they will add you to the crowdfunding pitch. And if their employees like and engage with what you are, then twice a year they have an opportunity. They're given a fixed sum, I think it's around £25 for each employee, and they can donate it to a charity of their choice. If you can create a great story and engage with them, and something that attracts their employees to your organization, then, you know, if you get accepted, they would then donate their money. And the thing that Aviva does is every donation that you have, then they will match it. So you get double the funding. We worked with Aviva and on one of our projects, and we had about 17,000 from them in one of these crowdfunding, and half of that was match funded directly from Aviva themselves as the company. So, you know, you look out for those things. They're worthwhile. And whilst all these things take time, again, there's sort of a double return on something like an investment like that. Grant funding always is the sort of the mainstay in everything that we go to, I think, as charities, and we just think of grant funding off the top. And there are different types of grant funding where you have project focused, it's restricted, and usually that means like a capital project. So I want to build a polytunnel, I want to build a compost toilet, I want 10,000 plant pots, I want 5,000 root trainers, I want 25 spades, those kinds of things. They're very distinct and individual, easy capital projects to define. And those ones are the easiest ones to get funding for. Challenge definitely comes for business as usual. So that's unrestricted funding that funds things like your salaries, your rent, perhaps, your utility bills, the things that you pay for week in, week out. And they are quite challenging. And, as a successful charity, we still find those types of funding very, very difficult to access through the grant funding. So your capital works, I've mentioned there, whether it's infrastructure, it could be materials like your compost, it could be doing distinct outreach projects. So there may be part of your local community that you want to engage with. So therefore you wrap that up into a grant claim to say, we're going to need this kind of resource, we're going to need pay for this number of hours, and we're going to target this group, and that group is going to receive this many benefits from being engaged with us. And that would be something like an outreach capital project. As I've just mentioned here, your revenue stuff, if you have these things, rent, wages, software subscriptions, mobile contracts, counter software, water, electricity, heating, utilities, these are all the everyday things that are just going out all the time. And they can amount to quite a lot. And for us as a charity with 5 staff, 5 paid staff, some part-time, some full-time, and then we look at all the materials we need for the tree nursery, all of those consumables, then actually that represents about 81% of our income generation need, which is significant. When you're applying for anything, then definitely don't do a scattergun approach. You'll fail. You really need to be very, very focused in your fundraising, particularly around the grants, but I'd say in all elements of fundraising. But when it comes to grants, read the criteria and reread the criteria, and then read the criteria again, because whilst that may sound daft, you could spend days writing a good grant application. And if you haven't met the criteria, it will be binned within 10 minutes of them receiving it and reading it. So just be really focused on the criteria and look at the guidelines. I've known in my time, and I've made the same mistake myself, I've applied for grants, then I realize I'm not even in the right county for that grant. It's an environmental grant. We grow trees, we fulfill everything, but then in that little print, is, the grant only applies, say, to the northeast of England, and therefore we're completely ineligible. And you fill it in, you spend all your time doing it, and you'll be discounted within seconds. So do check on the guidelines and eligibility. And it's also worth noting when you look at these things, and you can find out, because you can go on the company house and you can look at the charity and you can look at the account details and you can see who they've gift funded to, and then you can check on who they've been giving money to, and are we in the same kind of boat as them? Because if you're not, then your chances are probably much slighter of getting an actual grant application, successful grant application with them. So that's also worth doing a bit of homework, bit of detective work, and also look at how much they give. They might say they give grants up to £1 million, but they might only give one grant of £1 million, but they'll give 5,000 grants of 250 quid. So again, think about where you want to be in that, in the amount of money that you want, and is your project worth £1 million? Is your project worth £500,000? Is your project worth £1,000? Really think about value for money, because that's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what they're thinking of. And they want, to help as many groups as possible and make sure their money is really targeted in the delivery. So definitely don't over ask. Having said that, in terms of points of negotiation, I think it's always worth to slightly over ask, and then you may find that you get slightly less. For example, I definitely in the past asked for £10,000 and they've come back and given me 5. And I said, thank you very much, because that was great. And they definitely wouldn't have turned it away. So quite often, if they like your project, they may still give you an award, but it was slightly less. So when it comes to information that funders like, I spoke to someone from the National Lottery who was a grant application assessor. And it was quite astonishing. He was saying, they had only about 10 to 15 minutes to assess each grant application. And we are talking there, when we're talking about National Lottery, grants for up to £5 million. That was what he was looking at. And they were still only initially looking at this first application 15 minutes, because they have so many applications. They just look at it. Does it meet the criteria? Is the information right? Yes. On this pal, no. On that pal, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then it gets, a second look at, the yes pal gets a second look at, and then maybe a third look at, and then you're there, you're going with it. So you have to put into your applications the information that will definitely grab their attention. And numbers is one of those things. I'll just go back a minute. So when we're talking about numbers, it could be, how many trees are you growing? If you're planning to plant woodland, how many hectares, acres of woodland are you planning to plant within that year? How many people do you engage with? How many people from certain societal groups do you engage with? And if you're a startup group, start recording this information now, because it will definitely help you in the future as you go along. So how many seeds have you collected? How many different species have you grown? How many trees did you actually grow at the end? How many trees did you sell or donate? How many plant pots do you go through every year? How many tons of compost do you use every year? Things like that. It may sound a bit crazy that you need to keep those notes, and the measurements don't need to be, to the nth degree, but definitely you need to have that information. It will really, really help you in terms of filling out applications in the future. And in terms of what they like, crossover here is so a funder may like the fact that we grow trees, but they would definitely much prefer the fact that we engage the local community in growing trees, and we work with local farmers to then get those trees planted. And some of the people that we work to, we give them training to help them into employment. And some of the people we work with may have mental or physical health issues, and they are getting benefits from their engagement with us. So that's crossover. So it's multifaceted, and don't underestimate yourselves as a charity or as an organization, as a community tree nursery. You will be hitting a lot of those buttons. You may not be aware of it, but most of the people, for example, that come and plant trees with us, whilst they like planting trees or whilst they like growing trees, it's not about that. Most of it is about social engagement, dealing with issues of loneliness, keeping themselves physically fit, getting out into the open air and having opportunities to share experiences with other people. So those are the things, when you're writing a grant application, you should be putting into the grant application, as well as sort of the element that you grow trees and so on and so forth. Just checking my notes here. The other thing is quite often applicants like it when you are also engaging with other projects. So as a community tree nursery, if you can engage with an other organization, and then you can put in a joint proposal, that will definitely get you more brownie points when they come to look at it. So it may be that you have a local health centre and they want some trees planted. So you're going to work with them to plant some trees. Might be a local school. So you're helping them establish a green space where they're going to do some forest schooling. So that is another way that you can get crossover and definitely added benefits. So longevity, this is all about the legacy element of it. So funders want to give you money. And there isn't actually a shortage of money out there. There is a lot of money out there, but it is heavily contested. So it's about you writing a good project. But the thing to show to them is that if they give you this money for this project, is it going to have an impact beyond the project's funding cycle, if you will? So it could be they're funding you for 6 months of a project, but if you can show to them, actually, what you're doing is paying us to establish the building blocks, but we can go beyond this. With that funding, we will be able to go beyond this, and we can then, we will have established a framework for these opportunities, and we can continue to deliver what we're saying we will deliver for, say, the next 18 months or the next 2 years. If you can show that kind of legacy, that's fantastic. And legacy can also be in terms of traineeships. So, you can get funding very much for traineeships and bringing, young people, 16, 24-year-olds, or people not in employment, education, so forth, and giving them an experience which they can then, which is tangible and meaningful, which they can then take on and will help them get work in the future. That's longevity, that's legacy. So again, those things can be very, very useful. I think I've covered this one, actually. I've talked ahead of myself here, but we're talking about, working together. So this is working with the other organizations and charities in the area, boosting engagement in the community. And I definitely would say, collaboration is great, very important. The next thing very much is value for money. And so ask for a sensible amount of money, cost it out, get your Excel spreadsheet out or your abacus, whatever you prefer to use, but definitely demonstrate value for money, because they will very quickly recognize that, if you're asking for 10 plant pots, but you want 10 grand, then, you're not value for money. So they will really look at this, and quite often, quite a lot of the grants people actually want a spreadsheet of costings, and they want to know what they're paying for. And there you've got to get a little bit clever sometimes. So if it's for a piece of equipment, that's dead easy. You can go and you can get 3 quotes for it, or you can, and then you can demonstrate that in terms of your ask. If it's for delivering projects, then you need to think about all of the costs. So it's not just the costs of equipment, but it's the staffing costs. If you're doing it volunteers, what are your volunteer expenses? They've got petrol or diesel, fuel allowance, travel expenses, subsistence. Do they need anything for that? Is there any PPE, or is there any associated clothing? Are there any tools? Are there any training materials? Even reams of paper. If you've got to print off a load of stuff, that's inclusive. Inkjet cartridges, super expensive. Add it in. So you have to really drill into this and start thinking about it. And then when you think, oh well, here we've got a project where we're going to bring one school group in. It's 30 children. And they're going to have a day in the tree nursery, and we're going to show them about how to plant seeds and grow trees. Well, you've got the school So you've got school time involved in that. You could ask for the coach fees to bring the kids out, because most schools actually don't have the money to pay for a coach to bring the kids out. Are you providing them with any refreshments? Is there any health and safety issues? Do they need any gloves, for example, things like that? Do you need to provide wellies or waterproofs? Have you got enough plant pots? Have you got the right compost? Have you got the right tools? And all of that you can build into a project, and then you'll be able to show it is value for money, because you've actually detailed it, and you're saying, yeah. Some people think you bring a group of school kids out for a day, and to be honest with you, if you're a charity, they think you should do that for 10 bob and a conker, and it's not the case. You've probably actually spending about 500, 750 quid if you're building everything that I've just said in terms of staffing costs and time and coach fees and so on and so forth. So it does add up, and so do take the time to add that up. The other thing is that funders want to see that you are a functioning organization. You're not just some person whacking an application for some money. They want to know that money is going to a legitimate organization. So these are things they want to see usually. When it says committee, they usually, if you're a charity or you're one of the other things that I can't actually now think of, but there's various ways, not just charities, gone out my head, bosh. They want to see that you've got a business bank account. It's not just made out to Mr. Adam Owen, £10,000, ka-ching, thank you. They want to see if you have been running a number of years, the latest accounts that you submitted. They want to see the latest 3 months bank accounts. They want to see your governing documents. If you're a registered charity company, they want to see that. So it's worth actually just getting these into a single Word document, something like that, just putting them down, and then you just go and grab them. Every time you do an application, you can just access and grab it, and it speeds up the whole process. They also want to see evidence of insurance, your health and safety, risk management, equal opportunities, safeguarding policies, financial management policies, things like this. A lot of these things, if you're looking at that and thinking, well, we have none of that. Loads of templates online, loads of really good templates online, and these are definitely things that you can take and rehash for yourselves. They're very good as Moor trees. That's where we started. We've refined them a bit over time, but they are out there to access on the internet for free. So do take the time to do that. Pardon me. So on your application, it's important that you have everything that you're going to need before you start writing it. So we've just covered some of the key items that funders want to see. But when you're looking about the detail of the information you should put together to get started, do you need to gather some information before you write that application? Do you actually really truly need what it is that you're asking for, or you just want some money, you've seen an option and you're going for it? This is about making sure that the application meets the criteria. So definitely also concentrate on your urgent priorities. There's a lot of nice to haves in life, but if you're looking for funding, focus on what you really need. Let's say just for me, the way I work is, what do I need in the next 3 months? And then what do I need in the next 6 months? What do I need in the next year? What do I need in the next 3 years? And that's how I break it up in my head. And that's where I direct. And usually I'm working on funding bids for all of those at the same time. All the team is, not just me, at the same time, but prioritizing on the immediate needs. Again, we've talked about the costs, and you can get your quotations. You can do research to make sure you're getting the right equipment, and work out those calculations for staffing costs or volunteer expenses and so forth. But the other thing is, if you do have staff, or even if you're applying for a member of staff, because that's quite real as well, then when, and I've been caught out in the past on this one, you think, well, I'm going to pay them this much. And you do the application, you put in for it, and then you realize, oh, I forgot to add in national insurance, got to add in pensions, got to add in the expenses, got to add in all these other things. And suddenly there's about another 40% on top of the original salary cost. And if you've just been awarded that grant, you either refuse the grant, don't employ someone, or you accept the grant, employ someone, and then you have to find that other 40%. So, make this again is sort of a warning about try and think of all costs. And there are grants out there to employ staff as well. But if you are going to do that, then think about longevity. If you can demonstrate that you could keep that person employed for 3 years, for example, and you might not get all your funding from that one source, and highly unlikely, but it could be that you can demonstrate you've already got some funding secured and you're going forward for some additional funding to support this, so on and so forth. It can be quite good. And then the other thing is, what is the outcome? So one thing that they'll all be asking for is to demonstrate your efficacy. How well have you done here? How are you going to prove to me, as the person that's given you the money, that you have done what you're going to do in your application, what you've said you're going to do in your application? So within that, you've got to demonstrate before you even do it what your outcomes are going to be, which sometimes can be quite challenging. And sometimes you can go, oh, well, we're going to get, 5,000 engagements, and we're going to have 3 amazing days where we're going to get the whole community in and get them engaged. And then we're going to reach 37 schools. And you think, oh yeah, all of this is super obtainable. You get the grant, and then you realize very quickly that actually, 4 months in, you're not even anywhere close to those targets. And that's when the panic sets in. So one of the things, again, is be reasonable in your outcomes. And that relates then back to value and relates back to what the project is going to actually achieve. Because outcomes are super important to anybody who is going to be giving you money. And you need to be able to write those down, almost like smart targets. You need to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, targeted, and all of timed, and all of those things. So do your best in your outcomes to make those realistic. So just because it will save you a massive headache 6 months down the line. I appreciate all this sounds a huge amount, but it takes time. It does take time to get used to doing grant applications, particularly, and doing asks to other people. So don't be freaked out by this presentation. I'm just throwing it all out there because that's what this presentation is about. It does take time, but you will be all right. So when they're asking you questions, they're going to be asking you to, what do you do? What's your objectives? What are your aims? Why do you do it? How do you know what you're doing is valid and right? Is there a need for it? So again, just have a think, talk to your peers about what are your aims as an organization? What are your activities been? What have been your achievements so far? And those things will help you wrap this up, because quite often they say, give a brief summary of your organization in 100 words. You try that and write that in 100 words. That's quite challenging sometimes. And you'll end up 500 words in going, oh, need to cut a few back here. So, they want you to be concise. So it's good if you can sort of have chat about those things with your peers and get some main bullet points down, and then bring it back into what they want, the structure that they want. And something actually I've learned over time is in these scenarios, bullet points really do work very well in applications rather than continuous flowing text, because you can use a lot of these joining words, and when you do flowing text, and it just bulks up massively. So in 100 words, you might have like 20, 30 joining words. And so you've used a lot of things up with ands and ors and so's, and whereas actually if you put bullet points in, just chop it, you'll be able to get a lot more information in a lot shorter amount of words. Fundraising request, the title. Again, the thing is, if you can think of something that's memorable, snappy, this is advertising, basically marketing, but if you can come up with something that's memorable and snappy at a glance, that they may actually, just hold that as they're going through that pile. Oh, I like the sound of that one. That sounds good. So I can't tell you what those words are, because it all depends on what your objectives are. But do try and come up with something catchy and short and simple. You have your short summary of your funding request, which kind of goes on to what I was just saying before. You know, it's like you're saying about why do you want the money? It's got to be short. It's got to be concise. Why do I want it? Who's going to benefit? What difference will it make? That's it. Quite simple. So why do you want the money? Who's going to be involved? What difference is it going to make? If you do that concisely, then that will grab them. Your timescales for it. Quite often, particularly on the large grants, they want milestones. So what are you going to achieve in quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4? You know, or what are you going to achieve by June, by December, by March following year? Have a think about that. These are generally the large grants that are asking for this kind of information, not the smaller grants. But again, if you can have those things in your head. So please don't, I mean, for us, the big nightmare was we've got a fantastic grant. We worked with multiple partnerships. We got the Green Recovery Challenge Fund, great funding, 1.8 million across the whole project, five project partners. We said we would deliver all of this stuff within the next 12 months. And then we went into COVID lockdown. And the grantors were great and they gave us extra time, but I couldn't get a contractor into that site for about 8 months. Whereas originally I thought I would have a contractor on site in 2 months. So whilst they appreciate the pandemic situation and gave some flexibility, they couldn't be totally flexible because they were constrained by government that was funding them for a fixed period. So, you know, do definitely be realistic with your funding timescales. That said, if you hit a hitch, talk to your funder ASAP. You know, don't freak out about it for 6 months. Leave it to like the last 4 weeks and then say, I'm sorry, I haven't been able to do it because of these reasons. They'll be less sympathetic than if you came to them 6 months ago and said, I think this is coming. This is an issue. What can we do about it? They tend to be a bit more flexible. If they're giving you money, they want to give you money, and they will be happy to tend to work with you. The needs we've talked about, what the scheme, what your project will be for, and basically the needs or the issues that will be addressed by the work you're seeking funding for are all mixed up within that. And it is exactly as it sounds. There isn't any trickery at all. Make sure you can include any statistics if you can. And this was going back to the numerics. So again, you know, if you're to say this is the issue, so it may be that there is a degree of socialization within your area and you're going to engage with that community. So you then can say, with this funding, I'm going to engage 30 individuals dealing with social I shouldn't have even started that one, should I? Social isolation, you know, and they're going to come into our community tree nursery and they're going to work with us for 12 weeks. That might be a project. And there's a simple, smart target. And in terms of how are you going to address the issues or needs? So this is quite often when you're talking about crossover. So when you're going to go and work with another organization or a group of people that you wouldn't normally socially engage with or expect to socially engage with. So you may identify issues. For example, you may choose to work with, I've mentioned loneliness, so you may choose to work with people, as we have in the past, people who've been in prison and they're trying to return to work. So, you know, there's a defined issue there. You know, these people may be on probation. These people may not have the skills that they require to get back into the workforce, the things that they wish to do. So your project is about engaging with them. So it may be you're engaging with the probation service and you'll work with them to talk about how you're going to address those needs and what the process will be to get a successful project out of it. And again, the numbers are how many people, who, how long, that kind of thing. So how do you decide at the end of the day where to look? So you've got a lot of competitors out there, and of all of the grants that are given nationally, about 6% of them are for environmental works. There's an astronomical amount of environmental charities in this country, and and so there is quite stiff competition. You need to stand out amongst them. So in terms of the focusing, you're going to definitely focus on charities that focus on what you do, focus in your local area. Those are two of the first hits to go for. And then you want to see is, I'm looking at them, I'm looking at this charity, I'm looking at their charitable aims. When I mean a funding charity like a trust or something, you're looking at what are their aims and objectives. So you want to say, what can I offer that the others can't? So knowing your competition, and then trying to work out how you can demonstrate to them that it's better that you get the money than your competition. That in essence is what that element is about. So you need to explain why your organization is well placed and qualified to deliver the work that you're putting out there. Talk about your team, talk about the people that you've got, the experience they have, talk about your track record. And again, this doesn't have to be staff. This is volunteers. As volunteers, you all have an absolute wealth of experience, which you can talk about. So where to look for money? So first one, Google, boom. So the search engines are, and you can search grant finders, environmental funders, grant giving platforms, and so forth. GrantNav is a free platform, and you can search for funding information, and you can use different categories such as location and sector, which is what I was just alluding to in the previous slide. And you've also got the Grant Excellence Framework, which is a very good funding finder, free to register, and you're able to sort of pin down your fundings that are specific to your organization's needs. There are also government grants. So again, it's worth checking with your local council what's out there. Central government grants, and some examples of this depending on what you're after, but currently just today, the Forestry Commission's, or today or last week, Tree Production Capital Grant, Tree Innovation Capital Grants, and one of the woodland grants has just opened again for this year, and there's millions of pounds in it. So depending on what you want to do and whether you can fit with some of those criteria, then well worth approaching. The other thing is often think about grants as well, that you might think you might not be eligible. I mean, COVID was an interesting one because there were lots and lots of grants out there for businesses, and whether it was just paying for your rates or other opportunities. Some of them was just about keeping the charity going because they recognised the charity sector was difficult. I think we managed to acquire 5,000 from a local authority as a grant, just for existing as a charity within the local region. So it's always worth just keeping an eye out on those sorts of things as well, and see where you're at. Trusts and foundations, there is a lot of money out there in trusts. The trusts and foundations, a lot of them do fund small organizations and fund sometimes very substantial amounts of money as well to small organizations, but they also fund a lot of small projects. So if you have the time, you can actually send out letters to a lot of these trusts or do the applications. A lot of those trusts have very simple applications as well, which is great. So maybe 500, 1,000, 1,500, 5,000 pounds, and you might be able to do 4 of those in a day and get them off your desk, and see how you get on. Worth a punt, most definitely. But again, what I've talked about before, in trying to make sure that the trust is focused in your area, because if they're not, then you've wasted your time. So they are usually quite specific though as well about time periods. So some trusts will have 1 window a year, some trusts 2 windows a year, some have a rolling window where you just send it in and then they will just pick it up, every 3 months. Whatever's coming in those 3 months will get picked up, but it's a rolling 3 months kind of thing. So again, worth just finding out. And the grant nav and the charity excellence framework I just talked about are on there too. And then there's alternative income to your charity. So this all depends on what you do. Sorry, charity is community tree nursery project. All depends on what you do, but it can add some resilience. So if you do tree plant, then talk to the people you're tree planting for. Will they give you a donation for the trees? Will they give you a donation for you coming and actually planting those trees? One of the things we do, we work with landowners, and we will talk to them, and we will do woodland design with them, and we will help them with the UCO, the English Woodland Creation Offer grant scheme, and the Plymouth South Devon Community Forest grant scheme applications. So we'll give them some advice on that. And those things, it takes a bit of time. It took me probably about not 2 months solid, but over 2 months to get my head around the application process and what was required and so forth. And then I was in a position where I could talk to other landowners about it and give them some confidence. And for that, they were quite happy for us to charge them for that additional service. So that may be something if you are doing tree planting. If you're an organization that has membership, we have very small membership, only about 200 members. But those 200 members give us somewhere around about £3,000 a year, which is fantastic. And then some of those members are very generous when it comes to Christmas, and they just give us a little bit extra, which is wonderful. So all of these definitely help. So all of these things are opportunities for you, and I appreciate that's very quick run through of grant funding opportunities and income generation opportunities. But that's all from me. I'm happy to take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. That's wonderful. Very comprehensive. Appreciate that. It was tricky as well with your cold, so well done. Thank you very much. And just to say that we'll hand over to Alex now, but we might have time for some questions after Alex's talk. Probably not as much time as we normally have, as we're finishing at 8:30, but we will try to fit in a few questions after Alex has spoken. So now over to Alex, who's the Programmes Officer for Thames Chase Trust, and he has been working there for well, just over 3 years, I believe, since January 2020. Originally, he was employed to exclusively manage the on-site community tree nursery, but since then he has joined the programmes team and still takes the lead on the tree nursery and related projects. So I'll hand over to you, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just get me slides up and running. Ta-da. There we go. Let me know. There we go. I think it's loaded in now. So I'm going to do a very quick bit of background about the Thames Chase Community Forest, and then I'll kind of jump in. Adam's presentation was fantastic and so comprehensive. So I'm going to give a bit more of a view on what we do specifically, and also kind of some of the different avenues that we go down. So I'm not really going to cover grants in as much detail. Honestly, I wish I'd seen Adam's presentation 3 years ago when I started. That was absolutely brilliant. So Thames Chase Trust is one of now 15 community forests in England. We're spread out all about the country. The common theme is that they're on the edge of major cities and conurbations. They were set up by the government in the 1990s, and we get some government funding, but not any significant amounts. It's much more kind of all individual charities. And for us, it's not just tree planting. So it's environment, it's heritage, it's people. We're a lot more linked to kind of the local community in a kind of a broader sense. Not that yourselves won't be linked in that sense. It's a very good idea to kind of connect to your community. But our targets are across kind of all three of those angles. However, since we were established in the 1990s, we've had a community tree nursery on site at Thames Chase Community Forest. And that's kind of gone through a couple of different iterations. So currently, the nursery is about 400 meters squared, so really small scale. We produce in and around 1,000 saplings a year that are ready out for planting. And we have weekly and weekday volunteer sessions to help manage that, and then monthly weekend volunteer sessions to help manage that. So kind of real small scale, real local to our area. We have saplings that come in kind of 3 different categories. So we have ones that we grow from local seed, and then we manage ourselves and grow on. And when they're ready, kind of 18 months or sometimes up to 3 years later, those will go into the wider environment. We have some saplings which are donations from members of the public, and we have a kind of quarantine area where they stay for a set amount of time. We check for any diseases or pests they may have. But because we're on the edge of London, lots of people grow things they find in pots, and then once they get to about 2 feet tall, they have no idea what to do with them. So they potentially bring them into us. And also we are involved in lots of other tree planting projects in our kind of local area in the Thames Chase Community Forest. And sometimes those will have leftover saplings for whatever reason. It might be that the wrong amount was ordered and there are 300 canes and guards and 350 saplings, and they can't possibly plant them without having canes and guards on. So we would look after those, manage them in our nursery for the year, and then we can go back to the organisation and say, we've looked after these. We'd establish, did they want them? Are they donating them to us? And if they are donating them, where have they come from? So that we have our own parameters. For us, it has to be UK based if it's from an external source. Because a lot of the partners we use require UK based and plant passports. In terms of income, we have kind of 4 main streams of income that we kind of tap into specifically for the community tree nursery. So the first is the sale of saplings. Sale is a very strong word. It's more of a kind of asking for a donation. And we ask for a £1 donation from partners, and that's to try and keep in line a bit more with commercial tree nurseries. I mean, you can go online and buy, 50 crabapple for 70p each. So £1 for our local partners is a little bit more expensive than they might pay for online sales or from larger tree nurseries. But with that community element, we feel like it's worthwhile. And then we also sell to members of the public. So we have a kind of a little sapling cart that sits out the front of our forest centre. We have online advertisements for what we can sell. People can come in and look and see what we sell, and then they can buy those. And we do those at £3 to again compete a little bit more with commercial nurseries. You can see our numbers at the bottom there, 1,700 kind of in winter 21-22, and then 1,100 in winter 22-23. So we're fairly kind of consistent around that range. And you can do the maths. That's in and around £1,000 a year, maybe something like 2,000. So it doesn't kind of cover our staff costs at all. It does entirely cover our operational costs, however. So it all depends on what you're trying to use the money for. For us as well, with the kind of the sale of saplings, it's many are sold to organisations that we already work with on other projects. So local councils, other local charities like London Wildlife Trust in our case, or RSPB. And it's often a case of getting in touch with the right team, such as a local park ranger or the environment officer at a specific council. And we went about this by just emailing and ringing and going in person to speak to people. These contacts weren't kind of small. We've been established since the 1990s, and some people we talked to, we were put back in contact when we originally got in contact with them back in the 1990s. So these contacts can take years to build up. Sometimes it's a matter of kind of getting your foot in the door and then ensuring that you know someone well enough that if they kind of are leaving that role, they would think of you to tell their predecessor or the next person in the team. Another great group of people to get in touch with are kind of other small local groups. So for us, there's an organisation called Trees for Havering, which is very local to us. And they're absolutely brilliant and they want to be involved in tree planting and they're specifically in the Havering area, which we cover, so that's fantastic. Then the downside of that is that they don't have a budget or any funds available. So we can support them in their tree planting activities, but it's going to have to be for free from our end. So then it becomes a bit of a, well, why? What is the purpose of the saplings that we're growing? Is it we're just trying to get saplings in the local area, in which case we support this group on a limited scale for some projects, or can we support the group in fundraising so that they can pay us? But how does that work? And it's getting to know the people and talking to them and being honest that we have costs at the end of the day. You know, my role, as alluded to at the beginning, isn't solely based on the community tree nursery anymore. But certainly, you know, my line manager is very keen that I try and cover some of my staff costs through the community tree nursery. The other main method that we, well, another significant method for us for raising money is through community engagement. The community tree nursery that we have at Thames Trust, the primary goal is actually education rather than the planting of trees in the local area. We determined that actually we can't produce on the scale, we don't have the in-house knowledge, and we don't really have the funding to seek external knowledge to be able to bump up our tree production facilities to 20,000 saplings ready per year. So for us, it's much more about community engagement and education. So that education and community engagement can take many forms: children, volunteers, members of the public. And as such, we like to link up with local youth groups, especially from kind of spring to autumn, brownies, beavers, those kind of ages, also kind of guides and scouts as well. And we offer educational evenings, educational days in the tree nursery. We do charge for these, but we keep it quite low because they have their own costs as well. They only get a small amount of money from funding. I can take your question. Rod, is now an appropriate time? I don't know. Oh, you're muted.
If you take questions at the end, Alex, if that's okay.
Sorry, yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself.
That's all right, no worries.
So with youth groups, we do charge for them. We charge £35 per session, so not loads of money. That's a full hour, including planning time, including kind of producing leaflets and things. And again, as Adam has said, we kind of have to work out, right, if there's going to be 12 children, how much paper and ink is that going to be? Because in one isolation, it doesn't seem that much. But last year we had 11 sessions that ranged from having 12 children to 30 children, and quickly your paper and ink costs start to add up. And those sessions are educational. They can be working towards a badge that the youth group is doing. We can cover kind of tree life cycles and quite simple topics if they're young. Whereas if they're a bit older, we might go into creating bug hotels, the kind of planting trees and what trees need, kind of compost management and things like that. Much of the tree planting we do is also based at schools, and schools will come visit the tree nursery as well, and we offer a charge for that. And when we go and visit the school, we can talk to them about tree planting opportunities that they have there. If they want us to help create a hedgerow or a small copse or something like that, we charge for the tree planting. Schools often don't have a lot of money, so it's, again, trying to work out, is there a grant that we can access that can help pay for that and build up that project with the school? Does the school want us to come in and do educational elements about trees and tie that into biology lessons or geography lessons or what have you? And there's also general open days and community events. So because we have a wider remit than just the tree nursery, where we have a spring fair coming up in a couple of weeks' time. It's mainly focused on heritage for this particular spring fair. So we're talking about kind of the local buildings and things like that, and the history of the area. But there will be a stall on the community tree nursery. There will be a stall there, and we'll have a presence there, and we'll have some saplings in pots that people can come along and purchase if they want. So we try and have a presence at local events like that. The last thing we do as well is we have family seed collecting days. So we need to gather seeds in autumn, and lots of the time families want to get involved. Lots of families want to do tree planting, but if they have really small children, it might not be appropriate. So around our local area. We'll sometimes run days where families can come along, collect a couple of different seeds. We'll talk about what they are, and then the children will get to kind of put 3 or 4 in a little pot, which they'll take home, and then we'll kind of take the rest and we can then sort them out. And then it's kind of free labor. But a better way of wording it is definitely community engagement. And we've had families who've come back year on year to do that with their kids, which is really lovely to see. And then to touch on grants a little bit, specific grants for specific needs is the best advice. I think Adam said it right at the beginning, a scattergun approach is not very effective. We've found also that capital and physical costs are much easier to find funding for, whereas staff time is a little bit trickier and often needs to be worked into other grants or needs to be worked into much more kind of crossover related projects, linking in other things as well. We said earlier that I'm now part of the programs team, so I have a much wider remit, and part of that is so that my job can be doing some of these other projects, which will help fund my time and mean that the community tree nursery can still operate, but actually ensure that my role is kind of paid for. We did have a successful grant to Tesco's. I bring up specifically Tesco's community grant, which I think has changed its name since then, and also Groundworks. And they came in about 10 years ago, and we got a great amount of grant funding from them. They built a potting shed, things like that, help rabbit-proof the fence, those kinds of things. So those were real physical delivery, but there was no staff time or anything like that paid for. The big one for us was the Land of the Fans Landscape Partnership Scheme, which was actually a heritage lottery funded project, all based on the local area. It wasn't the tree nursery who wrote this, but basically the Land of the Fans, they wanted to have a series of projects in the local area that they could enhance and work on. And the tree nursery luckily was one of those projects, one of 26. And so that meant that we kind of tagged onto that. We did report writing to the Land of the Fans Partnership Scheme, which was then doing report writing to Heritage Lottery. And that was brilliant. That was a 5-year grant that paid almost for the majority of my time when I started. And there was contributions to the kind of physical improvements at the nursery as well, but also we had access to the knowledge of the Land of the Fans team and be able to draw on other people's experience and learn more about how we can do grant applications ourselves. So that was brilliant. Other projects for us, Trees for Climate is a big multi-year government project at the moment that all community forests can tap into, and that's specifically related to tree planting. So as such, we can kind of link that into the tree nursery. That's mainly the cost of staff time, but it's kind of a bit of a balancing act. I'm out in February. I'm tree planting kind of 3 or 4 days a week to try and maintain that we're hitting our Trees for Climate targets. The other thing for us is we're actually undergoing an expansion of the community tree nursery at the moment. So currently we have kind of capacity for about 1,000 saplings ready every winter. And we're having an additional space produced, which will increase that from 1,000 to about 4,000. So it's quite a significant expansion. And a large part of this was paid for by a local construction company. So we got in touch with them, and they were able to kind of provide us some funding. And the way they provided the funding was the physical item. So one day, all of the materials to build a new tree nursery just kind of showed up with very little notice, which was fantastic. We're kind of playing catch up on building it at the moment. But for them, it ticked all of the boxes they wanted to. They wanted to be involved in an environmental project. They're a construction company, so they could get building materials cheaper. And then they've had volunteers come and work with us in the construction of the new tree nursery. So that's been brilliant as well. We obviously did press releases and lots of publicity and that kind of stuff. So it's thanking them and trying to keep those links as well. And we're still in touch with them and seeing if there's any other ways they want to help out. And I suspect they'll probably send more volunteers to us in the future. And I also bring up the orchard. So this is an example of a kind of a different project that was able to cover some of my time. So we're doing an orchard regeneration project for our specific local orchard at the moment. And some of the resources from this grant are to pay for saplings that we're growing in the tree nursery. So to buy rootstock from UK suppliers that we can then graft saplings onto to then put out in the orchard. And that's, although kind of a net zero in a sense in that isolation, what it does mean is that our volunteers can learn how to do grafting. They have the material so they can practice. It's something else that is kind of enticing people to come along and volunteer with us, because not everywhere does grafting. And then also this is able to pay for some of my time to lead community events in the orchard, which is also a kind of a alongside goal. So that's a very quick kind of run through of the Thames Chase Community Tree Nursery, much smaller scale, and for us it's all about kind of tying into other projects. Thank you very much. Here's some pictures of our tree nursery and our volunteers in the rain.
Thank you so much, Alex. That's wonderful. Brilliant. Just before we invite questions, I'd like to invite Andy Egan, who's the Director of Fellowship of the Trees. He would like to just share a few ideas, and I think he's got a couple of questions as well for CTNs. So Andy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm sounding like I've got an echo going on.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. Is that okay for me to carry on? Maybe take questions, see if I can sort it out.
Okay.
Andy, there seems to be two of you in the session. That might be something to do with it. I'm not sure. Should I try kicking the other one out?
Yeah, kick the scruffy looking one out. Does that happen? Right, okay. Yeah, I kicked him out anyway, so okay. Luckily it's just one of me. That's more than enough, I think. And well, thanks to Alex and Adam. I sorry I missed the beginning of Adam's talk, but the end was fantastic, and all of Alex was great as well, so I'm sure the rest of Adam's was. So given that we're actually trying to raise money from the Community Tree Nursery Collaborative ourselves, then a lot of those tips might be really handy. But on the point of maybe the community tree nurseries looking for funding collectively, there's a couple of possible ideas around at the moment. One is, with my other hat, this is probably the other Andy that we just kicked out, he works for the Woodland Trust during the day, and we've actually got a meeting on Friday, and we're looking at the potential to apply to the Tree Production Innovation Fund, DEFRA's fund. It's in England, but it can include UK-wide work, and looking specifically if we could work with community tree nurseries for a bid to that fund, which has just reopened. So if there are any tree nurseries, you can go on and look up Tree Production Innovation Fund and look at the guidelines. We're looking for well, as it says, innovation. If anyone's particularly around diversity of broadleaf species, perhaps around species that people might be collecting that aren't the really common species, which the commercial tree nurseries grow. So if anyone's got any idea or interest in being part of a application with the Woodland Trust around that. The other thing, and I don't know if Adam touched on this as a potential source of income, but Woodland Trust run the UK ISG, UK and Ireland sourced and grown scheme, and it could be that we look, part of that project is to enable tree nurseries to become part of the UK ISG scheme, in which case you could supply the Woodland Trust for trees, and I'm assuming we pay, don't we, Adam? That's not the part of the organisation I work for. Do we pay a reasonable amount?
And so in the past, yeah, we've had some funding that was for providing trees to landowners for planting. So it wasn't providing trees directly to the Woodland Trust. Well, it is exactly what you're saying there. This year, they're talking to us about how we can supply the Woodland Trust directly with trees. So there's no, there's been no discussion yet on the funding and what that would look like. And you know, it's not boiled down to a unit price per tree, but equally the funding that we used to get, they've said they don't see there wouldn't be too much of a difference depending on what we can offer. And exactly that, they were saying they're really interested in trees that aren't normally grown by the forestry sector. So Yeah.
So potentially we could try to put a project together with a number of community tree nurseries, try to get some upfront funding to do any sort of development capacities building that community tree nurseries might need. So to get some upfront funding and then enable you to then sell trees to the Woodland Trust as well. So a bit of a virtuous circle potentially around a diversity of tree species. So if anyone is interested, you can just email us at info@fellowshipofthetrees.org.uk. As I say, we've got a meeting on Friday. It'd be great if there was any indications from community tree nurseries that you might be interested in being part of such a project. So that's one idea. Another idea that's been raised with us and has come from the Tree Council is, and it might link a bit to what Alex was talking about, is the potential of developing some regional hubs who could support the development of community tree nurseries in schools. So that's something that, you know, very tentative, but I mean, again, if there are community tree nurseries that potentially could be interested in that, I think we're going to hopefully be having a meeting with the Tree Council soon. So if anyone's super interested or already working in that area, you could maybe join us in that meeting as well. I mean, again, Adam and Moor Trees have done a lot of work with the Tree Council through the Trees Outside Woods project and developed the Cops in a Box and other great stuff. So it could be about building on some of that as well. But they've got a specific idea around community tree nurseries based in schools. So if anyone's interested in kind of exploring that a bit more with us, and you know, maybe offering to be a regional hub where you kind of go in and do training for the schools and help them set up their little community tree nurseries or copses, then again, get in touch and I can try and loop you into any meetings that might happen if you want to be part of that. So brilliant, thanks very much. And I just also want to do a big shout out to Hilary. I haven't been at recent meetings, who's done a fantastic job in growing and coordinating the Community Tree Nursery Collaborative. So it's done a brilliant job, and as I said, I think we've launched a crowdfunder because we're really trying to ourselves get funding to keep the collaborative going. It doesn't cost a lot of much money, but if anyone's got any wonderful ways to share that crowdfunder, then please do. So thanks, Hilary, and back to everyone for some questions.
That's great, thank you, Andy. That's really useful. Yeah, I did put a link to the crowdfunder at the beginning of the chat. And also the CTNC email and the Facebook page. So right at the beginning of the chat, we'll save the chat and send it as a file also in the follow-up emails. So Rod, do you have a question you'd like to put to the panel? Just need to unmute yourself, Rod.
Yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted Alex's thing, but really I just wanted to say that Adam's presentation was right from the coalface, and it was brilliant. But we very successfully, as a startup, managed to get a tree production capital grant last year, which was brilliant. And when I was doing the application, one of the things that I was advised to do was to update my LinkedIn profile, which came out the blue to me. Whether it worked or not, or whether it made an influence or not, we were very successful in getting grant funding. So I just wanted to put that one to you, because it seemed to make a difference to us. Thanks.
Thank you. Has anyone got any questions they would like to ask, or anything that they'd like to share?
Just going on the back of what Rod's just said, I think that's quite important, actually. So when you apply for a grant, you write down who the person applying for the grant is. You write down, if they have a job title, you write down kind of bank holders and like who are holders of the account. And those are all names that can be checked. So yeah, well worth making sure you have some sort of presence to almost prove that you're a real person. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to show that A, you're not a con artist, and B, your project is genuine. So the more evidence you can supply that, the better. And that's where feeding in and doing social media with previously successful projects will all come into play.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good point, Alex. So we've got a few more minutes if anyone's got anything else they want to add or any questions.
With Andy's comment about the diversity of broadleaf species or not common species, so would that be about doing your homework about what local commercial tree nurseries or big commercial tree nurseries tend to do, and then finding something else? I mean, I don't know how diverse. I suppose that's the idea, isn't it? If you can offer something slightly different but still welcomed, then that's a bonus.
Yeah, I think Adam will probably know the figures better than me, but I think something like 60 or 70% of all the native species that are grown in commercial tree nurseries are just from 4 different species, 4 most common species in terms of the major. Most of the seeds come from the same company in the UK, so there really is a concentration on a relatively small number of native species. So I think there's, I can, if it helps, I can probably try and find out which ones they are and share a report on that. So there's plenty of opportunity for diversity, and I think if that can be complemented by local provenance, that adds another positive aspect to it in terms of more resilience of local tree species.
Well, I was just thinking, I'm based on the in Somerset, near the coast, so like coastal trees, you know, there are certain species of trees that do better in specific areas. Yeah. So actually, could that be the kind of niche that you're looking at?
Hornbeam from Somerset and are critically endangered. I think there's about 7 or 8 varieties of hornbeam which are on critically endangered list. And I think they're kind of specifically native to Somerset. So if you can find them and you can cultivate seeds from them, you could be onto a winner there.
Okay.
Another species to look into is perhaps black poplar. So UK native black poplar is the rarest UK native timber tree. There are databases online that look at the genealogy and look at where specifically, because it grows much better from cuttings, but it tends to be that everyone plants clones. So if you can work out if you have local clones of certain types, generally speaking, most commercial nurseries are providing 3 or 4 clone trees, and everyone is planting the same 4 types of black poplar across the whole country. So if you have any local black poplar, certainly for us at Thames Chase, black poplar is one of the endangered species that we focus on. We track exactly where we bring them to, get them from, and track exactly where we send them to, and follow up with partners and make sure that it's going to specialised locations that are suitable for black poplar. Just to plug black poplar, great tree.
Thank you.
Adam, did you want to add something to that?
Sure, yeah, thank you. And I tend to always look at Elba trees. Elba trees are based up in Scotland, and they just grow millions and millions and millions of trees. Huge numbers for the forestry sector, but they do grow a wide range of native broadleafs. They grow in about 46 of individuals. So the issue though is, and going back to what Andy says, this generally is about local provenance. So you've got Forest Art, which collects most of the seeds for trees in the whole of the UK, but they collect most of those around the Welsh borders, Shropshire and Northern England. They do not collect a single seed at the moment from 305, which is basically from Bristol down to Wareham and to the Scilly Isles, because there's no one asking for them, and therefore it's not in their interest, and it's not economically viable for them to come down this part of the country where we are in Devon and collect tree seed. So what the Woodland Trust have been saying to us over this time is, you know, this region is really valuable, because you know, they wanted to plant 750,000 trees in the southwest last year, and they couldn't get 750,000 trees that were 305 provenance. So they were talking about tree nurseries, community tree nurseries in the southwest, growing those trees, which could then provide them directly to the Woodland Trust. And this, pardon me, is not just particular to the southwest. this is all across the country. So wherever you are, I think if you are growing local provenance trees, then you'll be on a winner to start with. If you're UKISG, then that's the second, whole great thing for the Woodland Trust, of course. And then I think as well, although you look at Elborough and they're doing things like Gelder Rose, Wayfaring Tree, Elder, Buckthorn, and Privets and so forth, and there's just not a lot of them. So if we're looking for a more diverse, and this is what the Woodland Trust is looking for, is for more diverse woodland planting rather than just these typical forest trees, your oaks, your birch, your beech, or your conifer selection as well, then don't think you have to go super exotic. You don't have to start growing a load of tulip trees and Indian horse chestnuts. It's also about local provenance. If you are also growing those parkland trees as well that I just mentioned, for example, then I think there's definitely a market for those too.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're just about out of time now, so I think we'll probably bring the session to a close. I'd like to thank Adam and Alex for fascinating talks, and I'm sure you'll agree that there's a lot of information there to get your teeth around, head around even. And this session will be obviously available on our YouTube channel and the CTNC page of the Fellowship of the Trees website by the end of the week. So you can always go back and re-watch, and do share it with your friends and contacts as well. And just to say that next Monday, the 27th, we have another webinar, a special additional one to our usual programme, and that's an introduction to biosecurity. So please do come along and register for that. You can register via the Eventbrite page and check out our updates on social media for more information about the speakers for that one. So yeah, thanks again, both of you, Adam and Alex, and I hope you get better soon, Adam. Yeah. And I hope to see you all again soon. The next session we'll have after next week will be our open space in April, and funding provided, we will be obviously hoping to do another webinar in May, but obviously that's all pending what happens with funding. So watch this space. Thank you all. Thanks all for coming.